in Rwanda,
Rwanda, which offers multiple benefits to the importers, and from there they export it to various African countries.
Okay.
So that is the reason why they have chosen Rwanda. This is they take goods to Kenya, to Mombasa port, and from Mombasa port they take it by train to Rwanda.
Okay.
They have a train connectivity.
Right. Okay.
So because of that, they can avail multiple benefits of a free zone area, and they can ship or send the products to various African countries over there.
Okay. All right.
So
Makes sense.
that is also multimodal. Then the third one we chose was from China to Azerbaijan. Now, if you know, from China to Azerbaijan, there is also a train available, which pass through transcontinental train, which goes up to Europe. But the train route is very costly up there. So instead of going through that, people take the goods by sea up to European port, not European, up to I think Turkey or up to Iran.
Okay.
And from there they take it by road to Azerbaijan.
Okay.
So this is basically to save on the freight cost.
Freight cost, exactly.
Yeah.
Goes to this one there,
So-
Bandar and from there.
Yeah. So these are various examples why and how we can use multimodal transport.
And you said where was the last example starting from?
I think Shenzhen also.
Okay. All right.
That,
Okay. Good. No problem. So that's good. All right. So thank you very much once again. All right. So the whole concept of this multimodal transport operation comes down to one simple thing, right? What we are looking at, we're talking about, sorry, just 1 second. So what we're talking about in terms of multimodal transport operation is that okay, when we are looking at multimodal transport operation, we are looking at movement of cargo from one location to another, but we have to keep in mind that the whole operation must happen in a single contract of carriage. Okay, if at any point the contract breaks, then it's not considered as multimodal, right? Like for example, if I'm bringing some shipments from US, okay, and the consignee is sitting in Oman, okay, the cargo lands in Ajman port or Jabal Ali port, and then it goes to Oman by land. Logically speaking, this is multimodal transport operation, but actually it's never going to be considered as multimodal transport operation. Why? Because they consider this as one region, right? They consider this as the Khalij, the GCC, right? It's one region. And as per the unified GCC law, it states that the customs clearance needs to be carried out at the first point of entry. So if the goods come to Ajman or if it comes to Dubai, the clearance needs to be done here, and then they have to take it by land to Oman or Saudi, you know. So in that case, this is never going to be considered as multimodal because the contract of carriage will finish in Dubai or Ajman. They will have to do the customs clearance here, they will clear it off, and then they go ahead. Alright, so that is what we have to keep in mind, that it's going to be separate contract. It's just like a transportation company I'm hiring and telling them take the cargo from here to. It's the same thing like taking the cargo from the port to Sharjah or to Oman. It's the same thing. It's just another contract, you know. It's just I'm just hiring a transportation company and letting them take the cargo from one place to another. So what happens is that it's very important for you to understand the concept that it all happens in a single contract of carriage. Okay? If it is happening, yes, if I change the mode of transport in another way, like if I'm doing the same transaction, I'm moving the cargo from, let's say, US and I'm sending it to Oman, but it comes by sea and then goes by air, yes, it will be multimodal because it's all going to be within a same contract. But as soon as the cargo needs to come inside the mainland, All right, so like we were talking about, we saw that anytime the cargo tries to come in the mainland, all right, automatically we need to carry out all the operations. Okay, here. So anytime it comes into mainland, if it's even going to pass by, even if it passes by the mainland or local market, they are going to be clearing the shipments here, and then they will have to take it to the other location. Okay. As per the operations which are happening over here in UAE, okay, they still consider that even after we have VAT now, and we will say that markets are low whatsoever. As per the statistics, between 65 to 70% of the shipment which is coming for the region still lands in UAE, and then it is distributed from here to all of these places. Okay, of course for UAE it is coming here only. No one is going to bring, if anyone is bringing shipments to UAE in Dubai, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, any of the 7 Emirates, no one is going to actually bring the cargo to Oman and be like, okay, bring it from Oman to Dubai. It doesn't really happen. Usually they prefer to bring it over here. Okay, one of the main 2 reasons. First one, because the ports over here, it's all around the sea coast, right? There is a port everywhere. I told you 3 ports in Dubai. Dubai is so small, right? Every Emirates has at least 1 or 2 ports. So it becomes a much more competitive advantage for them to bring the goods over here. Talking about the ports which are older, like and the authorities who are handling the port authority which are handling, like Ajman Port, okay, it's handled by a multinational company, Hutchison, right? And they are also operating ports in other parts of the world. Okay, looking at Jebel Ali Port, it's handled by DP World, also a multinational company handling ports across the globe, right? So in this case, what happens, it becomes a competitive advantage for them to bring their shipments to these ports, because they know that, the shipping agents know that they know what they're doing, right? It becomes much more easier. There are lots of ports coming up also, but companies don't prefer, or shipping agents or lines don't prefer to bring their ships to those ports. Why? Because they're still working on their operations, right? It's still coming up. They're newer ports, okay? So that is why it becomes a competitive advantage. If you will look at it, if you look at the map, to come to any of these ports, they have to come inside to basically get to the port over here, right? If you look at the ocean, it's on the other side. It's talking about the side which is the Fujairah side, right? Where Fujairah is, Khorfakan is, on that side. The ships are coming from there, they're going all the way inside, and then coming to Jebel Ali Port or Ajman Port or whatsoever. But they're preferring to do that. Why? Because they know that their work is going to be done in a more efficient manner. And of course, for the trading community, they are of course using UAE point of entry and exits because of the factor that it becomes much more relevant and more efficient for them to do the transaction, right? So, question. Today in Ajman, how do you do the customs clearance? How are you doing it? Is it at the counter, or is it through a portal, or is it through brokers? How do you do it? Anyone? Anyone who's doing customs clearance here in Ajman? Clearing shipments over here? In Ajman, how does it happen? Even for free zone companies, how do you do it? How do you deal with the government authorities? Do you deal with the government authorities through a broker, or do you deal with them directly? How is it over here? For free zone, how is it? Directly? With the customs authorities? Or do you go through brokers? Sir?
We have brokers.
You have brokers. So you cannot go directly to customs and clear your shipments?
We can, but it is ease of operations,
Okay.
basically.
Okay. So you're using mainly brokers, but the option is available for you to deal with them directly also,
Yes.
correct? So that is the plus point over here, right? In UAE, the authorities allow the companies to deal with the government entities directly, right? You don't need to go through a middleman to basically do all of these operations. If you would like to, you can. If you want to deal with the broker and proceed further, no problem. But the authorities over here allow the customers and the companies to deal with the government departments directly, right? Like we have happiness centers for customs, we have for traffic department, we have for chamber, we have for all of these. So like if I have a question today, I can just walk into the government department and ask them a question and get my transaction carried out. I need a certificate of origin, I can just walk into the chamber. Okay, I need to do the customs clearance, I can just walk into the customs, okay, or deal with them directly, whatever method they might have, like that. So that is why it becomes a competitive advantage. In a lot of other countries, even though they have been developed for long and lot of years, okay, you don't know what's happening. You don't know how to clear the shipment or who you're going to be dealing with, right? Like you're talking about US, Canada, whatsoever. You know, you're sending shipments, you have no idea, okay? Here, for the best part is, because of the blessings, of course, okay, and the vision of the leaders over here of transparency, we have very big transparency about all that is happening around. We can directly deal with government departments, right? That is what. In other countries, you have no transparency, right? Like for me personally, I send a shipment, okay? I'm all over the place, okay? But I'm from Canada, okay? From Toronto, okay? I sent a shipment to Canada, okay, once, and I went over there to collect it. When I went to the customs guys, all right, my shipment was rejected. I did not know, okay, for whatever reason. I went to the person, the clearing company is like, okay, you have to pay all of these charges. I'm like, okay, I paid all the charges. He gives me a paper saying that your cargo was rejected. There is an email address down. Contact them and ask them why it was rejected. I have no idea, you know? So in a lot of places, that's what happens. You will be dealing with a middleman, a third party, a freight forwarder. You might not have complete transparency, but all of that is much better over here. That's why companies prefer to be dealing with authorities or doing their businesses in this part of the world, because they're having the transparency, they can do it much more freely, they can understand the procedures and go on. And it's a development phase, right? It's a development phase. We all are learning with the government departments. If something new comes up, right, we don't have to just panic about it. It happens, right? Like for example, few months ago, no one knew about masks. They had no access code for masks. They were having issues. We were just discussing that yesterday. The masks, we only had one type of mask, which was these 3-layer masks, which were for medical purposes. There were nothing else. Today we have like different types of masks. You can have like with a cloth. Okay, they're having different types of wheels which are available. You know, so there's a new whole lineup which has come out. Okay, products have changed. Gloves, sanitizers, all right. All of these products, they were not there before. Not a lot of people were using them, but now suddenly the trade has just increased. It has gone towards another aspect, more healthy aspect, right? That's a good thing in a way. Technology has grown a lot also. And that is all the topics that we are going to be covering in the last module, which is module 5.2. Okay? This module covers two main important topics, which is about logistics and supply chain. Okay? So here in these two topics, we're going to understand about logistics, alright? So we're going to understand about logistics concepts and know the basics of supply chain. Alright, so we're going to touch those topics. To start off, we're going to go ahead with a little bit of a brief or history on logistics concepts, like how it started off, when it began, and so on. So here are the different development phases, okay? Now, starting off, the origin of the discipline, 1950 to 1964. This is for information only, alright? I'm not going to be asking you anything with regards to this, alright, the exam or whatsoever, but just to give you a better idea. If you look at the era over here from 1950s to 1964, this was a time of growth. Production was at peak, manufacturing outstrip distribution, product proliferation, and scramble merchandising. So this was the era where it all started off, right? Logistics started, but it was very low. Before this, there was nothing known as logistics. People were not really moving out of their comfort zone. Companies which were in US and Canada or in North America were only catering to North America. The companies in Europe and Asia were only catering to each other, you know. People were not going outside. Like if you wanted to get products, you would not get products which were out there. Like today, it's easy to get any type of product. Like I want mango juice, apple juice, pineapple juice, anything I can get it, right? I can get products which are based out of any fruits, any products, right? But back in the days, it was more like you would find products which were more date based, you know, something that is available in the country, okay? People were making more. You'll see more sweets which were dates, made out of dates. They were not other foods. You'll see juices, milk, whatsoever. It was not, you would find camel milk everywhere, okay? That is why it was, okay? So it was like that, okay? Now it's like now it's not as much. Now you have all the products available for everyone, okay? That is how it is. And here, like it says, manufacturing outstripped distribution. The manufacturers did not think about what we want, okay? No one thought about what the customers were looking for. They were just producing a product, manufacturing it, keeping it on the shelves. If it's successful, it's successful, okay? If it is not successful, it's not successful, all right? Means, in short, there was no new version coming out of it, all right? So whatever products were there, that's it, okay? Whatever is going to come next is going to be a different product, okay? Might be a similar product, but it's going to be different. And also at these points, all right, and also the era after this, which was the period of maturity between 65 to 79, okay? Here, the customers' requirements started to become more demanding. They started understanding what they want. They started looking at distribution managers, were starting to get involved with material and inventory management. So it means they started keeping inventory. They were not just making stock of thousands of pieces and just putting in the market. They were keeping one lot. Okay, let's see if the product is okay or not. If there is a problem, then maybe fix it and then send it, right? Things like that. Okay, managers became more proactive in financial strategies and emergence of material management. Also, how to source the material. Before I'm making a product, I'm only going to look for the materials within my area, right? I find those products from there and I go ahead. Now here, started looking at material management, looking at, okay, I can get the raw materials maybe from some other country for cheaper. So I'm going to move out of my comfort zone. That is what was happening over here. And of course, the products at these points were made, and of course, before this, they were made of very high quality, right? Even today, if you look at products from the era from before this, from 1970s, 60s, 50s, 40s, okay, they have a value, right? If I have a watch from 70s or 50s or 60s, what am I going to call it? I'm going to say, oh, it's an antique watch, right? If I have a car which is from the 70s or the 60s, oh wow, you have a classic car, right? Logically speaking, any car which is more than 15 years old is considered to be as classic, okay? In some countries, 20 years, all right? But if I come up driving in a 1960 or 70 model Mercedes, people are going to look at me, they'll be like, wow, you know, so beautiful, such a nice classic car. But if I drive up in a 2000 model Mercedes, they'll be like, okay, it's a scrap now, you know, put it in scrap, there's no point of it, you know. So there is no value for those products which are coming out now, because nowadays, whenever a new product comes out, the previous product becomes redundant. Okay, you don't want to have the new one. Sorry, you don't want the older one. You want the newer product now. Okay, that is what is happening. Then came the periods for world recession, which was 80s to 90s. Okay, so the key points here. There was a lot of uncertainty, contingency planning, capital availability, labor union negotiations, and rise of the multinational corporations. This is where the companies actually got out of their comfort zone and started moving around, right? They started moving. So before, the North American companies were catering to North America. The Australian companies were catering to Australia. Now these companies started getting out of that market and moving somewhere in between. That's where Middle East started coming up, right? In 1980s was where Jebel Ali Free Zone actually started. Jabza started in 1980s. Because these companies started coming and establishing over here in the Middle East and starting to cater. So a company which was a US-based company started establishing in Middle East and started catering to Europe, Asia, Australia, everywhere. So they started moving around and going everywhere rather than just being in one location and just looking at their own customers. And the same thing vice versa. Companies from other places started moving around and started moving to go ahead and give those products. Alright? So that is what happened in 1990. And then the next era which started off, 1990 to present, is all, we consider it as information era. Okay? And we have just been enhancing with that era itself. Okay? And of course, in the last few years, like you can say 10 years, we are already in a technology era, but again, which is also based on information. So that is why we just call it the information era. This is where, in 1990s, the development of EDI took place. EDI are the electronic files, right? Okay, which directly goes through. Demand is more visible because of technology, integration of EDI with EPOS, electronic point of sale. EPOS is electronic point of sale, EDI is electronic data interchange. Feasibility of supply chain management increased. So like for example, EPOS is electronic point of sale. I go to the grocery store and I give him this bottle of water. He scans it and he tells me 1 dirham, right? I give him 1 dirham and finish. So in my head I'm like, oh, it's a calculator, right? But actually it's not a calculator. When he scans or she scans that bottle, it not only gives me the amount, but it also updates their inventory saying that we had 100 pieces, now we have 99 left. It calculates the profit and the loss, or the profit and the actual prices, puts it aside in the worksheet. Alright. It also basically, if let's say the quantity is becoming lower, makes an order to the supplier to replenish the stock, So all of this happens, so that one scan, when it happens, and once they confirm the order, all of these things happen in the background, alright, without realizing. That is why these systems are so efficient, right? Even if I go on Amazon or Noon or whatsoever, it will show me 24 available. I will put one in my cart, now it shows 23, So it's right away updating all the information. It's calculating the profit and the loss and everything for each product, and then they are going ahead and giving you the details. So this is where the information era came up, okay, and everything is based on information. And that is what we're going to understand. That today everything is visible and everything is moving forward based on information, okay. I go to buy a phone, I'm going to do a whole research, alright, regardless of if I'm going to use all those functions or not. I'm going to look at all the functions of it and everything, and then I'm going to go purchase that, right, that product, if I need it or not. I'm buying a car, I want all the options, right? Back in the days, there was no options. I would go to the dealership, be like, I want this car. Okay, do you have a black color? No, this is what is available. This is what you can have. I'm talking about the 50s and 60s, right? Today I go inside, the dealer will give you a whole spec sheet and tell you that, okay, these are all the options. Which one you want? You check mark, and then you can get those options in your car, right? So this is what has happened. Technology has changed everything, and even information has become a vital thing in today's market, right? Now, this is just a reflective discussion. If you just, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but just to think about it, in terms of reflective discussion, just to think about it and brainstorm, how do you feel things have changed for you in the last 5 years? Okay? Can you give me some examples? Like, what do you see around you is changed in the last 5 years? What is it that you were doing differently 5 years ago and today you're doing it differently? Yeah? Anything you can think of? Anything you can think of? I hope no one was in high school 5 years ago. Anybody who was in high school 5 years ago? No, right? Yeah, that's good. Sir, what do you think? How do you think things have changed around you? In terms of work, in terms of personal life, whatever. Usage of technology, anything. What do you think? In 5 years, how it has changed?
A lot of things have changed. Our reach to the end customers have changed.
Okay.
Lot of countries have come in our portfolio.
Okay.
Exports have increased.
Increased, okay.
So, lot of things
they've got more exposure, right? So
Yeah.
they have got more exposure. And with this whole pandemic, actually, if you think about in terms of technology, we have fast forwarded like 5 years ahead, right? Like if you think about it, 5 years, we were not even having anything that, oh yeah, we would sit at home and we would work, okay? Or we would have meetings online through internet. We would actually go in person and have meetings, you know? That is how the whole concepts were. Trainings, you know, teaching, all of this, and schooling. The whole concept for the whole education industry has changed, right? Now no one actually, most of the universities, they're having online lectures. They don't have classroom lectures. Schools are teaching students at home, right? They're just going online on a tablet and that's what it is, okay? Like, I'm not even kidding, like 8 months ago, 10 months ago, I was always on that rant with my children that don't use iPad, don't use computer, don't use phone. And now I cannot say that because they have to use it. You know, that is what they're going to be using every day for their school and everything, you know. Technology has actually moved ahead like a few years. What we were thinking that it would happen in the next 5 years has already happened. Okay, so in a way it's good, but in a way it is, I don't know, that's arguable, right? So in the last 5 years, technology has grown really, really quick. Things have become much more feasible. And if you consider these factors, capital availability, in energy, inflation, labor relations, globalization, like what you were mentioning, you know, like companies which were, you were having more exposure today to basically go ahead. Like we were talking about yesterday, right? Like anything that you want to do, you can just pick up your phone, Google it, and you'll get the information about, right? We have more information available for it, and in order to go ahead. But the point is that information was always available. It's all about what you're going to do with that information, right? Information is always around us. You always have the information available, okay? You have to change that information into knowledge. That is when it is going to be helpful for you. Everybody can give you information. I have Google, I can get the information. But if I don't use it towards gaining knowledge, then it's of no use, all right? So that is what you have to go ahead. And this is what companies and individuals have actually understood, that the information which we have, how to change it into knowledge, all right? That is what we are looking at. Now, going ahead, looking at the basics of logistics and logistics management. What is logistics? In modern international market, logistics bridges the gap between supply and demand. So, it seeks to integrate two things, material management and distribution management. So when I use the terminology logistics, what I'm talking about, how I'm going to get all the materials, like the raw materials, to make a product. And once I have made the product, how I'm going to distribute it to my customers. That is what logistics is looking at. Okay, these two main factors. Okay, I want to be making a product which is the most cost effective. Only way I can do that is if I get my material for the best cost. Okay, at the right price. Okay, if I'm going to end up spending thousands of dollars on just transportation, then I'm not going to be profitable. That is the point. So that's why you have to be very, very reasonable with regards to that. Okay, and that is what we're going to look at. The different types of logistics. Now there are many different types of logistics implemented by different companies. All right, looking at that. Over here, first one, procurement logistics, which is also called as inbound logistics. So here, what is happening? The management of raw materials or supplies. So we're talking about getting raw materials and supplies from different places and getting it over here. So, like it says, most companies who implement this outsource their logistics operation in order to focus on core competencies as well as the minimization of purchasing costs. Okay? So what they're saying is over here that they're gonna outsource the logistics operation. Okay? And by logistics operation, I'm not only talking about the movement, I'm also talking about all of those things which are involved in the products also. Right? When you talk about procurement logistics, like thinking about it logically. You guys know Alain? The company Alain? Al-Rawabi, Alain, these companies, Al-Marai, right? Now, if you look at Alain, okay, Alain makes juice, right? They make apple juice, mango juice. Are they going to go and start buying mango farms and apple farms? No. They don't focus on those factors. They only look at procurement logistics. They outsource that operation. They're going to look at which country has the best apples, all right? Let's get those apples from there. And how it's going to be the most feasible option for them to get those products over here and then make the products. So companies which are actually producing those products are not necessarily going to be the ones who are actually even manufacturing or growing those products, right? That is exactly what happens. Then comes the production logistics. Here we are looking at the logistics which is required for using your production capacities, okay? When you're producing the product, how much you're going to produce, when you're going to produce, and the main thing, once you produce it, where are you going to keep it? Do you have sufficient facilities available? You have a warehouse space? You have temperature control? Because see, I'm going to end up manufacturing product. Let's say the cost of manufacturing is very cheap for me, okay? I can manufacture the bottle of water for 10 fils. And I know that in the stores I can sell it for even 2 dirhams, even 10 dirhams, no problem. But the point is that if I need to get a warehouse and rent a warehouse to keep all that bottle while the stock lasts, my cost becomes more, right? So that 10 fils is of no point. Because I'm going to end up spending more money on logistics, transportation, storage, all of these things. And then my cost is going to become higher and then I'm not profitable. So that is why production logistics is very important also. That's another type of logistics. Use available production capacities to create products needed for distribution logistics. This includes the movement from factory to warehouse, mainly used by manufacturing companies. Alright? Then comes the third type of logistics, which is project logistics. When I say project, we're talking about something special, right? It's a project. Okay, it's not something which is happening normally. Like it says, something that does not fit ISO content. That is, ISO is International Standardization Organization, right? So it's like it's not something normal. It's out of date. It's something different, which we have to move. Like for example, Dubai making the metro line. Okay, that's something different. It's not going to happen every day. You know, they need to get all of those equipments. I have a plane, okay, in Sharjah airport with a blown engine. Okay, I need to get a new engine for that. So how that engine is going to come? It's going to come by sea to Ajman port, and then I have to drive it all the way to Sharjah airport, right? That's the project logistics, because it's not something which is going to happen normally. I need to basically make sure what route I'm going to take. I need to make sure that it doesn't get damaged on the way, you know, all of those factors, right? Plus, even the origin, how it's going to basically be taken from the factory all the way to the seaport and then shipped, you know. So that's the project logistics. So like it says, handling of material that cannot fit ISO container, or if it is out of gauge, for standard transportation, as well as the management of contract-specific materials. All right? All right? And then comes the distribution logistics. All right? Also very important, because here we're talking about delivery of the final products to the customers. How they're going to deliver the products to the customers. Getting the products to the market from the various warehouses where the goods are originally stored. So wherever their locations are, where they are kept, the products, okay, in the warehouses, how they're going to bring it to the customers. Distribution centers, or to the malls, or whatsoever, wherever it is, okay? So that is what they're talking about in terms of distribution logistics. And then comes, in today's time and age, one of the most important ones, which is reverse logistics, right? All operations related to the reuse of products and materials and management of surplus. This can also mean creating a logistics process for return of defective products. Today, this has become the most important part in day-to-day activity, right? When I'm buying a product, the first thing I look at what? Warranty, right? That is what I'm looking at more before I'm going to buy anything. Reverse, even clothes, anything that I'm buying, I'm going to look at, okay, what's the return policy? Now let's forget about all of the gadgets and technology and everything. Forget it, okay? Every day or every other day, I go to the local grocery store and I pick up milk. Right? I buy milk. and bread. Okay? And what is my regular routine? I'm going to look for the milk or the bread which is the latest, right? I'm not going to just pick up anything. I'm going to look at, okay, what's the production date? And I'm going to go ahead. So if I'm doing that, I'm pretty sure everybody who's buying those products is doing the same thing, right? So what about the remaining milk? What happens to that? What do they do to it? Do they just throw it? What are they going to do with it? Any idea?
Return it back to the
Okay, and then do what with it?
company. Might think of alternative use of that.
Like what? Change the label and send it
No.
back? No, nothing like that happens, okay? The chamber doesn't be like, what is that teaching us? Alright. So basically, that's true. That is what exactly happens. When it says that the milk is going to expire today, it's not like if I drink it today, I'm going to be sick, falling on the street or something like that. No. It still has some shelf life left. And again, if its production date is today, if I leave that milk in my car for 1 hour, okay, I know weather has become good, but still, it's going to become into yogurt, okay, within an hour's time. Alright, so that is what's going to be there. So that is what's going to, so it all depends on the correct preservation. You have to preserve it the right way. Now, usually, when these products are available on the shelves, what they do is that once they have a routine, a reverse logistics process, and the guy is going to come every 2 days, put the new milk, take the old stock and go. Give it back to the factory, and then the factory reprocesses it. They'll make other products with it, right? They might make some other, like flavored, put additives and make flavored milk, right? Chocolate milk, strawberry milk, if it's okay. If not, then they might make it into yogurt. They might process it to cheese, whatever. You know, there are a lot of other things. So they're going to basically reprocess it and then go ahead. So that is how the whole process works. Okay? Last time someone told me that they give it to the cats. That's why we have so many cats in the world. Right? No, it doesn't really happen like that. Yeah, we just have them. Okay, and that's what. Actually, the other day I was reading some news that they said that if you feed them, you're going to get a fine. Like if you feed the stray cat somewhere, they're going to give you a fine if you're just going to feed them somewhere. Alright, anyways, yeah, continuing here. So that is what reverse logistics works on, right? So we're talking about the reverse logistics process where everything which comes to the stores is going to have a process to go back and then do something else with that product, right? So that is what we're talking about. And here we're talking about everything now, okay? So this is the dairy product. So it's similar to that. We have return policies, we have reverse logistics process defined for cars, okay, for services, for phones, for gadgets, for appliances at home, you know, things like that. So that is what reverse logistics is. So today, this has become a very important factor, and of course, because of the advance of technology, it has become much more visible and easier for people to actually do that also. Alright? What is logistics management? Management of the process of moving and storing goods and materials from the original source until the ultimate user is logistics management. So when we talk about the right place, right goods, right time, right cost, we're talking about logistics management. Alright? Logistics management. Right place, right goods, right time, right cost. Alright, so that is what we are looking at. Why do we use logistics? For two purposes. Various sources from widely dispersed location and widely dispersed customers based over multiple locations. Meaning, we have products in different places, we want to bring them all together, and we have customers in one place. Okay? Or, we have the products in one place and we have customers in different places. Alright? And that is what we do here, right? In UAE, we made it as a hub. So we cater to both of those factors. Okay? That is why logistics is so much booming over here, because we cater to both those factors. We have people bringing goods from all over the places and keeping it over here for the customers over here in locally, and keeping it here to send it to different customers also. Alright, so that is why it becomes an added advantage for that. What is the objective of logistics? Of course, the most important, reduce the cost. All right, improve service, create opportunities to gain competitive advantages. Now here is the activity diagram. All right, so like you can see here, we have the material management and the distribution management. So the material management focuses mainly on sourcing the raw materials, how you're going to manufacture the product, and have the finished goods ready. And then comes the distribution management, which is to get the goods to the customers. All right, so that is how the process is happening over here in terms of distribution. How you're going to take the goods from the factories or the warehouses or distribution centers to the end users or customers. All right. Logistics planning cycle, just like any planning cycle, we have a logistics planning cycle, 4 steps to it: strategic planning, tactical planning, operational planning, and performance measurement. Right? Strategic planning, strategy. What are you going to do? Your long-term plan. Okay, what you are aiming for. That's what you do over here. Okay? Tactical planning is basically looking at your operating budgets and deciding on what you can do. Right? What you can do. So like realistically, what you can do. I will say, for example, strategic plan, oh, I'm going to bring all my shipments by air. But tactical plan, it doesn't make sense, because if I'm going to bring everything by air, I'm going to lose a lot of money. So it's going to cost me, it's going to be costing me higher. Then comes the operational planning. So what happens with the operational planning? This is what you actually do. So here you thought your plan, here you saw your budgets and decided what you can do, and here what you actually did. Right? You said, I'm going to manufacture 1,000 pieces, but maybe your machine broke down, so you could only manufacture like half of the quantity. Right? So here you look at the actual operational planning of what your manpower is and how much you actually were able to achieve. Okay? And then comes the most important in any planning cycle, which is the performance measurement. All right? So here you look at your actual plan, what you could offer, what you could actually accommodate, and here what you actually did. And then you use that information as your next strategy to better yourself, right? Okay, so continuous process of improvement. Okay, to improve yourself, you're going to use that measurement requirements to go ahead and make your new strategy and proceed further. Alright, clear so far? Any questions? Okay. Alright. Next one, looking at logistics management versus supply chain management. Now a lot of times, a lot of people have this misunderstanding that these two things are the same thing. They're actually not. Okay? Now let's look at this. Logistics management, it says physical distribution, material management, warehousing, inbound, outbound freight. So when we're talking about logistics, we're talking about movement, correct, of goods. Now when we look at supply chain management, it says all logistics functions. That means logistics is only a part of supply chain. Plus purchasing, producing, planning, schedule planning, facilities planning, coordination through IT. So what is basically supply chain? Supply chain is the end-to-end process. Supply chain is the complete idea. From the time you get an idea in your head of a product, all the steps until that product is not even sold, like is being used, is what supply chain is. Right? So looking over here, supply chain management encompasses the companies and business activities needed to design, make, deliver, and then use. So we're not only talking about selling the products, we're talking about usage of the product. Right? Today, if you look at those gadgets which we have in front of us, okay, laptops and phones and all of this, if they were only looking at the selling part, it would not be much. Right? Today they look at what, when we buy a phone, there are apps. You can download applications and you can continue the whole operation, right? It's not like you can just buy the phone and that's it. But you can actually continue with downloading apps, there are updates coming up, okay, there are products which are being launched for that product, okay, there are chargers, headphones, so they have a continuous process in terms of supply chain, alright? So that is what we are looking at. What is supply chain management? Supply chain management encompasses all activities in planning, sourcing, making and delivering a product to the final customer. In essence, supply chain management integrates supply and demand management within and across different companies. Alright, now here you can see a supply chain management diagram. Okay, so it says how we start off. Alright, so we have here all the details. We start off from the supplier, the customers, and then the end user. So you can see the products are flowing and the information is continuously flowing between the parties, right? And that is how the whole supply chain is moving. How is logistics involved? Logistics is there in each. There's logistics here, there's logistics here, there's logistics here, correct? But here we're talking about the complete process. And there are 5 major drivers of supply chain: production, inventory, location, transportation, and information. Okay? For any company, these are the 5 major drivers which are for supply chain. They have to focus on these, right? First one, production. Capacity of the chain to make and store products. What product to be made? Here, like it says, what is in demand? How much to be produced and when? And of course, the action includes the creation of master production schedules that take into account plant capacities, workload balancing, quality control, and equipment maintenance. So here we're talking about what to produce, okay, how much to be produced, and when. Now, for example, in Dubai, in UAE, in GCC, if not all cities, but let's say over here in UAE, okay, if I'm going to start manufacturing umbrellas, right, I'm not going to have that many customers for it, right? There are a few of my Filipino friends who actually buy umbrellas, but other than that, no one else does, People are not very much interested in buying, okay, not really. I had to buy umbrellas for my daughters because they wanted it. And once I bought them the umbrella, they were like, Baba, why is it not raining? So weird. But yeah, but the point is that in terms of a business plan, I cannot come up with a business plan to start off a company to make umbrellas in UAE because I'm not going to get a lot of customers to buy those products. I cannot open up a company making heavy woolen jackets which are for cold countries. No one's going to buy it, right? It's going to be hot. Yeah, maybe someone might just get it for the look of it, but that's it. It's not going to be something which is going to be used by everyone, right? So that is what is going to be there. So that is what you have to make sure you know what is in demand, how much to be produced, and when. Have you heard of this company called Batil?
Yes.
Batil Cafe, right? Okay. Batil, what they claim? They claim that the production of dates that they manufacture and distribute in Ramadan is the same quantity they distribute for the remaining 11 months. Because that is the consumption of it, That's how much people are actually using it. They're giving it as gifts, they're having it every day, That's what it is. So that is what happens in terms of production. And in production, companies or manufacturing companies have 2 approaches. There's going to be a product focus or functional focus. So what is a product focus? Product focus is when I'm making a product. I'm making a phone. I'm making a car. I'm making a laptop. That's the product focus. And when I say functional focus, it's a focus for a product. So like, I'm going to make LCD screens for a phone, right? I'm going to make spare parts for a car, all right? Or I'm going to make accessories for a laptop or for a phone, So here, this product is based on the actual product. So here, your research must be even much more thorough, because if the product fails, you fail automatically. Like a few years ago, they had this product Note, right? I think it was a Note, which is to blow up, right? They banned it and they recalled the product. It was a Samsung Note phone, the mobile phone, the smartphone, which was having a lot of issues. I'm not sure which one it was, 7 or 8, I'm not sure. But it was blowing up. So they had to recall all the phones. Now we all know that all the accessories for the phones are available in the market before even the launch of the phone, right? So what happened to all of those guys, right? Those guys went in loss because they were focused on a functional. Now I cannot use that phone's cover on some other phone, right? So it's of no use. That is what happens. So that's why you have to be very thorough about it. That's why you will notice that most of the companies, like for example, spare part companies, automobile companies, who are manufacturing engines and brake pads and all of these parts, these can be shared. They are shared. The brake pads in Corolla are the same which are in Sunny, Nissan Sunny. You know, it's like that. Okay, they can share the products in different models. You know, the engines are shared between different brands. You know, German cars, Japanese cars, like Mercedes makes an engine which is on their smaller cars, 2-liter engine. The same engine goes on a Volkswagen, it goes on a Lincoln, it goes on Infiniti. I gave you brand of Germany, Japan and Canada, US. From 3 different countries, but the engine is made by one company which is a subsidiary of Mercedes, and they are sharing that engine between different places. So it becomes easier for them to make spare parts and so on, right? That is what functional focus is focusing towards. And with production, manufacturing and factories, they also need to focus on warehousing. How are they gonna store the goods once they are manufactured, where they're gonna keep it, how much they're gonna keep, and so on. So warehouses can be built to accommodate different approaches. So there are 3 approaches: stock keeping units, job lot storage, and cross docking. Stock keeping unit, the traditional way. You know, this is what the traditional way was. All the items for something are kept in one location. You will go and you will buy, and you should know what you want, right? I want to make the table, I have to go get the wood, the legs, you know, the screws, everything is separate. I will buy whatever I want to and then I will fix it, right? Imagine if I had to do that in IKEA. I would not be able to buy anything, right? So that is what happens. That's like a traditional way of stock keeping unit, is a traditional way. Then comes a newer option, right? Job lot storage. Something what IKEA does. Everything required for that particular requirement is kept at one place. And I go to IKEA, I look at the whole showroom, I like the table, I like the chair, I just go down, give the barcode, he gives me a box. I can take that box home, I open the box, I have the wood, I have the legs, I have the tires, I have the screws, I even have the tools to fix that table, correct? Everything is in that. That's a job lot storage. So everything, all parts, products related to a certain need of a certain type of customers are stored together, right? I go to a spare part shop and I'll be like, before I'll be like, oh, I want the brake pads, I want the different products. Now I'll just go, these are my car details, I want to change my brake pads. That guy will give me a box which will have everything in it. You know, it has my brake pad, it has my sensors, whatever required. You know, so things like that. So everything is available in the same place. And then comes another option for warehousing for production companies. Cross-docking. This is a facility that is used for a purpose where trucks from suppliers arrive and unload large quantities, okay, of products to be immediately picked up by trucks, and they headed to the distribution centers. So large quantities come in, they make it into smaller quantities, and they go ahead. Right? Basically, that is the concept which we took here in the free zone, right? Large quantities come and then distribute smaller quantities. Make sense? There is a company out there which took this concept to a whole new level and became the #1 retail store in the world. You know, they use this concept to become the #1 retail store in the world. Which company is that?
Amazon?
No, retail store,
What?
not an online store.
Walmart.
Walmart, there you go, right? You know what Walmart did? Walmart used this cross-docking scenario to become where they reached. How? You know what was Walmart's cross-docking station? Walmart's cross-docking stations were their stores. So suppliers would bring large quantities, put it in their stores, and individual customers would just pick up directly from the stores and take it home. So they eliminated the requirement of transportation and storage, you know, all of those things. So that's why I'm buying this bottle of water from the local store for $1. The cost of the bottle is 30 cents. Okay? The transportation and all of that adds up and makes the cost of the bottle to 85 cents. I'm selling for $1, I'm making 15 cents. Right? Whereas Walmart was able to sell this bottle for 75 cents, cheaper than the local store, correct? Or 70 cents, and eliminate all the extra cost in between. The cost of it is only coming as 20 cents or 30 cents. So the remaining 50 cents they have already saved, right? So they are able, their cost is lower, they are making double the profit from the local grocery store and they're selling it for cheaper, you know. There were companies in US, even today, there are like small grocery stores and shops who literally go to Walmart and buy products and sell it from their stores. And they actually are surviving for the last so many years. Because that's how cheap they go ahead. Because of the whole concept of proceeding further with these cross-docking operations. So that means that if I would go to a Walmart and if I wanted to buy some shoes and they did not have my size, the only other place I would get it is at some other Walmart or not at all. You know? Because it would come and it would go. In the beginning, they had to pay and then buy. Later on, they started getting credit facility, these stores, right? Lulu took the same concept, and that's how they became so big. Now, of course, they all have warehousing. But that's what happened, you know? And then eventually, today, what has happened is that these cross-docking stations, they don't need to bring big products, they don't need to buy products from the suppliers anymore. The suppliers come themselves to you and tell you that, hey, please keep my product in your store, right? You go to Emax, you go to Sharab DG, you're going to go over there, tell them, okay, I want to buy this TV. He'll take the payment. Most of the time, they might have stock, they might not. But they will be like, don't worry, we'll deliver to your door. Why? It's going to come from the supplier directly. Buy appliances, you buy a fridge or a washing machine. They only have the sample pieces lying in their stores. They will take that, bring it to you directly, lower in cost. You know, that will be able to give you for a better price. Okay, and technology is growing so fast. Talking about TV and Sharab. The other day I was walking in Lulu. I think Lulu or Carrefour. The TV I bought 2 years ago for like 4,000 dirhams. They're giving free with the washing machine. You know. It's like that's how it has become. Like in 4 years' time, it has no value now. You know, it's like they're like, buy this washing machine, you get it for free for TV. You know, that's what. The second most important driver is inventory. What is inventory? The stock which you're gonna keep, right? So here, what are the decision factors? What inventory is stocked at each stage in a supply chain? Are you gonna keep raw materials, semi-finished goods, or finished goods? Coming back to IKEA. If IKEA starts making all the tables and keeping it, how am I going to move it? Going to become a very big problem for them, right? So how do they keep it? Semi-finished, right? That is what they are focused on. So that way, it becomes much more feasible for people to go and get those products. They can make it themselves. Okay? Inventories are buffer for unexpected events in the supply chain. Inventory incurs cost. So what you have to keep in mind is that there is a cost to it. If I'm going to have a warehouse, if I'm going to store goods, there's going to be a cost to it, which is going to increase the price of my product. So you cannot always just have inventory lying with you, because then that's where you're going to end up also losing money in it. Alright, so that is what inventory is all about. 3 approaches for inventory: cycle, safety, and seasonal. Cycle inventory is by the time your stock finishes, you order the new stock, right? Or you order it once it's finished, right? So in that case, what happens in cycle inventory is that there will be a chance that you might not have products available for certain days. And in today's time and market, the customers are not very loyal. So if I need to buy something, I need to always have stock, right? So if I don't have it, I might just end up going to someone else, right? So that is why a more feasible option is the safety inventory, which is where you are going to place the order before your stock goes empty. So you have like 50 available, 50 pieces left or 100 pieces left, you place a new order. So by the time the stock finishes, your stock is replenished. So you're never going to be left with nothing at all, right? That is what is the safety inventory. So for fast moving goods, something that can come easily to you can possibly have cycle inventory. Okay, but something that's not going to be moving fast, alright, you need to keep a safety inventory. Like it's not going to come to you easily. And then comes seasonal inventory. So this is inventory that is built up in anticipation of predictable increases in demand that occurs at certain times of the year. Right? So here we're talking about inventory which is only a certain time of the year. So like for example, in like nowadays if I go to the gas station, alright, you have like coal and you have like those beach chairs lying over there, you know, you have like all of those tents available, you know. In the summertime they don't have that. In summertime they're giving you perfume, right? They're telling you that okay, you know, you need to use perfume in the morning. So that is what it is. So that's how the whole concept works in terms of seasonal inventory. Like I was talking about the dates also, right? It's seasonal inventory. It's not like all the time. Okay? What else? Vimto, right? People just buy that in Ramadan. I don't know why, but yeah, that's what it is. Okay? So that's how it is. The next driver here is location. So, what is location? The most cost-efficient location for production and storage, or choices between existing or building new ones. Determine paths of delivery to final customers. So here you're talking about where you're going to be located. Alright? Do you need to make a lot of locations and be available everywhere? Or you're just going to be having one exclusive location where people are going to come? It's a very important factor because thinking about it, like for example, if I go in the Ajman industrial area and if I open up an Apple store, how many people are going to end up coming over there? You know, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So I need to be located in a location where people are going to be able to come and then buy the product. So I should be in the right segment. Yeah, I might be able to open up a store for a very good price, but that is not feasible. I need to be located maybe in a mall, okay, or in a place where there are a lot of people coming in, okay, or it's easy access. That is what location is all about. Sometimes location helps you to be able to available. Yeah, even if you're exclusive store, you have to have a location where you can go ahead after like 15 minutes. Yeah? All right. So that is what we have. The next one is transportation. Transportation refers to the movement of everything from raw materials to finished goods between different facilities in a supply chain. Here, the fastest or the most cost efficient, right? Fastest air will be expensive. Cost efficient, most probably sea, but it's going to take time, alright? And also geopolitical factors for international movements. It's very important to choose the correct mode of transportation also because that is going to also determine the total cost of your shipment which is coming in, alright, for everything. The different modes of transportation: sea, road, rail, air. Okay, so we know about all of these. Pipeline, what are we talking about in terms of pipeline? What do we have?
Oil and gas.
Oil and
Oil and
gas,
gas.
exactly.
Crude.
We have a gas line which goes all the way from Abu Dhabi to Ras Al Khaimah. Okay, it's like parallel to E611, the highway. Okay. Electronic, what are we talking about? Electronic?
Money transfer.
Okay, money transfers are there. What else?
Data transfer.
Data transfer. Okay. How, like 5 years? Yeah, maybe more than 5 years. How people used to buy Microsoft Office like 5 years ago?
You have to go and buy
Go in
software.
the store and
Right? You have to buy
CD or something.
exactly
Yeah.
to buy a CD and installation and everything. Today, you just go online and buy it, right? That's what they're talking about in terms of electronic games, like PlayStation or whatsoever. All of these Xboxes. Today, you can just go online and you can download the games rather than going to a store and buying the physical copy, right? So that is what they're talking about in terms of transportation. All right. And then comes information, which is the most important driver in a supply chain, because information is the basis upon which you're going to make decisions about production, inventory, location, and transportation. All of that, all of the decisions which are required for the other four drivers is based on information. And the most important thing over here is volume of data to be collected and how much information to be shared. All right? And companies spend a lot of money for information. Big companies, right? Information is used for two purposes in any supply chain: coordinating daily activities, forecasting and planning to anticipate and meet future demands. All right? Here are the different participants in supply chain: producers, distributors, retailers, customers, service providers. And here is the structure. You can see here, ultimate supplier, companies, then come customers, and then the ultimate customer. And these all guys are linked to the service providers, like logistics companies, finance companies, market research, product design, IT. Market research has become a very important factor, and it's not since now, it's from before, you know. So before, back home in Canada, I used to work for a market research company, all right, and we used to do surveys. We must have done surveys, right? Some people call you up and ask you for surveys, they ask you for information. I used to do surveys over the phone, and we used to do surveys on cars, we used to do surveys on ice cream, we used to do surveys on email, on chats, so many things, you know. I have personally walked in downtown Toronto and given people up to $100 just for like a 15-minute survey. The company is paying. Company says pay them $100 and for the information. And there were surveys about everything. Cameras, phones, everything. And I used to always think that the entry-level people are the ones who are doing it. But actually, it's the actual leaders in the market who are doing it. Like the survey for the car, I used to think Hyundai or Kia is doing it. But actually Ford was doing it. General Motors was doing it, you know. The survey for phones, I thought that maybe the new entry-level guys were doing it. But it was Sony and there was Nokia who was doing this service. Microsoft was our client. Google was our client. And they used to take information. And that is what they go ahead. And they are able to proceed further. But today, because of IT and technology, it has become much more feasible for them to do direct marketing for you guys, right? Today I just go on my phone and type iPhone 12. And that's it. Now when I go on Instagram, I'll be scrolling, I will see ad for iPhone 12. If I go on LinkedIn, I will see ad for, I'll open my laptop, anywhere I will see, I will only be seeing ads for that same product. I go look for a mattress, for a bed. Next thing you know, I see only ads for that. That's direct marketing, right? They know exactly what you're looking for, and now they're giving you all the deals for it. All right? They take the information from you, and then they go ahead. So information is a very vital thing. All right? Before people used to pay for it, but now it's like it's available. It says agree to continue, you agree, finish. They have all the information, the caches, and they can basically do direct marketing towards that. Here is the SCORE model. We call it the supply chain operation reference model. And this is how it starts off, right? From supplier until the customer's customer, so the ultimate customer. And how is logistics involved? Logistics is involved in every single space, right? In every single part. So it's here there is logistics here. Every company is going to play some part in logistics at each stage. And that is how they go ahead. So this is the basic process involved in supply chain management. Alright? In terms of determining success, a supply chain is considered to be successful if the revenue generated exceeds the cost incurred from all activities, information, products that have passed across from entire chain. Alright? So once everything has gone from one place to another, you have got the whole product gone to the destination, your customer bought the product, and after doing all of the procedures, you made profit, your supply chain was successful. In this case, even if this guy makes some mistake, they will fail. If they make mistakes, they will fail. So it's always connected to each other, from the start to the end. Alright, clear everyone? Make sense? Any questions? Alright, so that is basically our last module, which is supply chain and logistics. Alright, so that concludes, and basically we have completed all the modules now. Alright, so we'll go ahead for our break. Alright, and then come back and then we'll do some revision for the exam. Alright, so that's what it is. Alright, okay, and then you guys have time to revise yourself. Okay, so we're going to go through a little bit of revision. We're going to ask a few questions. Just make sure you know the answer. Just raise your hand, you can answer it, and then you can take it from there. Okay, so we'll go through the revision for like the next 15-20 minutes, and then you have time yourself to basically revise for a little bit. And I think 12:15, yeah? Basil, 12:15, okay?
I don't know. Let's check. If you want more time to revise by yourself, it's okay. If you want, you can start 12:15.
Yeah. So by 12 o'clock we can start the exam. If you guys want more time, you can go start at 12:15. It's up to you guys, but
شو عندي صح؟ طيب قبل ما نبدا مثل ما ذكرت
Only one tick in one answer or multiple?
No. One tick, one answer. If there is A and B, for example, maybe D you will see the answer is A and B. It says A and B. Okay, but there is only one answer. Any sort, any question? The